5 miles south of Cardiff, there is an island where you can live for free right now. 5 bedrooms, all food included, up to £50 in travel expenses per trip. The only condition is you commit to 6 months of conservation work on a limestone plateau in the Bristol Channel, within visible range of the M4 motorway, where cholera patients were buried in unmarked graves and where wireless communication was invented. This is Flat Holm. Most people in Cardiff have never heard of it. That is the pattern this list will keep repeating. The free islands are not hidden, they are simply overlooked, each empty for reasons that explain something about what freedom actually costs. 15 of them are on this list. Some are open to anyone willing to make the crossing. Some are time capsules, left intact in a single month 50 years ago. One was contaminated with anthrax by the British government and sold back to its original owners for exactly what it was worth before the contamination, which was £500. Subscribe because we do the research on topics you randomly think about and forget. Let's get started. 15. Flat Holm, Bristol Channel, Wales. 26 hectares of limestone, barely clearing the Bristol Channel. Cardiff is 5 miles away. The Second World War left gun emplacements and radar ruins. The Victorian era left a cholera isolation hospital where the names of the dead are documented, but their graves are not individually marked. The 17th century left a lighthouse that still operates. In 1897, Guglielmo Marconi stood on a specific spot on this island and transmitted the first radio communication ever made over open water to Lavernock Point on the Welsh mainland, 3.5 miles away. The message received was, "Are you ready? There is a stone marker on the spot. You can stand on it." Marconi, Cardiff Harbour Authority, runs a residential volunteer scheme, up to 6 places, 6-month minimum commitment, accommodation in a 5-bedroom building called Driftwood, all food provided. Apply to Flat Holm Project at cardiff.gov.uk. The places are competitive. Since a More 4 documentary featured the scheme in October 2024, demand has increased significantly. The honest note is this: the Bristol Channel has the second highest tidal range in the world, up to 14 meters. In rough weather, Cardiff is visible and completely unreachable. The island has no natural fresh water. All water is harvested rainwater, stored in tanks, strictly rationed. Former wardens describe the water rationing as the most practically challenging aspect of island life. Not the isolation, not the weather. The thing they had not anticipated was the water. Water. You are standing on the limestone, looking northwest. Cardiff's glass skyline glitters on a clear afternoon. Below you, the channel's swell strikes the rock. The foghorn is still operational, and when it sounds, it is louder than anything the city could produce at this distance. Marconi's marker is behind you. If you could live for free within sight of a capital city, where wireless communication began, where the dead are buried without markers, where the sea cuts you off from everything at the wrong state of the tide, would the view of Cardiff be a comfort or a torment? 14. Northey Island, Blackwater Estuary, Essex. 1 mile southeast of Malden in Essex, a tidal causeway crosses the Blackwater Estuary to Northey Island. The causeway is covered for approximately 3 hours either side of high tide. It is the oldest recorded battlefield in Britain. On the 10th of August, 991 AD, a Viking raiding party used Northey as their base. The English Earl Byrhtnoth refused to pay them to leave. He allowed the Danes to cross the causeway and fight on equal terms, losing his numerical advantage and his life. The encounter is described in one of the oldest surviving poems in the English language. The poem makes the crossing feel significant. The causeway looks like mud. National Trust members can access Northey for free. Call the resident warden on 016-218-53142 at least 24 hours in advance. Walk 1 mile from Promenade Park along the sea wall and cross the causeway when the tide allows. On the island, you find flat marshland, salt marsh at the edges, wrecked barges visible in the estuary, and Northey House. Northey House was the former home of Sir Norman Angell, who argued in 1910 that war produces no economic benefit to either side. He won the Nobel Peace Prize for it in 1933. He chose to live on a tidal island, accessible only when the tide permitted. A visitor who arranged access described the island's quality as a remote wilderness feel despite being so close to Malden. 13. Piel Island, Cumbria, England. Piel Island, half a mile off the Cumbrian coast at Furness, offers the most eccentric arrangement on this entire list. A 14th century castle, a 300-year-old pub, a ceremonial title. Cumberland Council owns the island, gifted by the Duke of Buccleuch in 1922, and leases it on a 10-year commercial tenancy. The landlord of the Ship Inn is crowned King of Piel Island in a ceremony involving an old chair, a helmet, a sword, and alcohol poured over the new monarch's head. This has been happening in some form since 1487, when Lambert Simnel, pretender to the throne of Henry VII, landed at Piel from Ireland and was briefly king of the island before his defeat. In May 2022, Cumberland Council advertised the tenancy. Thousands of applications came in from around the world. Aaron Sanderson was installed as the current king on a 10-year lease. The position will next become available around 2032. The honest consideration is that running a pub on a 50-acre island is a commercial hospitality operation, not an escape, not a holiday, not a fantasy. It is a job with medieval accessories and Irish sea winters when the ferry does not run. People who applied in 2022 will need to wait another 6 years. You are sitting outside the Ship Inn in summer. The curtain walls of the 14th century castle rise directly in front of you. Eider ducks are nesting in the long grass beside the castle. The Lake District fells are visible behind the Furness Peninsula. The man who brings you your drink is officially a king. If the price of running a pub on a Cumbrian island with a royal title is 10 years of cold winters and no ferry, is that a bargain or a sentence? 12. Samson, Isles of Scilly, England. 28 miles off Land's End, in the mildest climate in Britain, there is an island where the last residents were evicted in 1855 for being too poor. Augustus Smith, Lord Proprietor of the Isles of Scilly, judged that the Woodcock and Webber families, surviving almost entirely on limpets and potatoes, were living in conditions too impoverished to be permitted to continue. He cleared them from Samson. He tried to introduce deer. The deer escaped or died. The island has been empty for 170 years. It is now completely open access. No gates, no admission charge, no restrictions on landing. The 19 post-medieval cottages are consolidated ruins, roofless but architecturally legible. You can walk through each one and identify, from the door placement and wall spacing, which room was which. Bronze Age burial chambers sit on both hilltops. Entrance graves approximately 3,500 years old, unguarded, and touchable. White sand beaches run on both sides of the central isthmus, with turquoise Atlantic water. No rats, completely free. Fresh water is not available anywhere on the island. This is the most absolute practical constraint on this list. Without solving the water problem, Samson is a day trip, not a home. Michael Morpurgo said, "Why the Whales" came on a fictionalized version of this island in 1985. Thousands of British children have read about it in school without knowing the place was real. 11. Bardsey Island, Ynys Enlli, northwest Wales. It sits 1.9 miles off the tip of the Llyn Peninsula, separated from the mainland by Bardsey Sound, where 3 tidal races converge. In October 2025, the Bardsey Island Trust advertised a farming tenancy for a 2026 start. Welsh speakers preferred. Apply to post at enelli.org. As of March 2026, the island has 3 year-round residents. It had 11 in 2019. The population is not merely declining, it is approaching a threshold below which community becomes impossible. 3 people is not a community. It is a handful of individuals on 179 hectares, with a notoriously difficult sea crossing and no electricity grid, solar and wind only. No cars, no shops, an unstaffed honesty box. What Bardsey does have is 1,500 years of continuous Christian pilgrimage, since St. Cadfan established a monastery in approximately 516 AD. Known as the Island of 20,000 Saints, the pilgrimage tradition ran for centuries. 3 trips to Bardsey equaled 1 to Rome. And as of 2023, it became Europe's first international dark sky sanctuary. On summer nights, 15,000 pairs of Manx shearwaters return from the sea to their burrows, screaming in the darkness, tens of thousands of birds filling the air with calls that have been described as unlike anything else in Britain. The stars and the shearwaters arrive simultaneously. You are standing on the grass in the dark, 1,500 years of prayer somewhere beneath your feet, 15,000 pairs of seabirds invisible overhead. The Milky Way is visible from horizon to horizon. If a community of 3 people is maintaining an island that has been a place of pilgrimage for 15 centuries, and they are advertising for farming families, is this a heritage project, a last stand, or a new beginning? 10. Stroma, Pentland Firth, Scotland. A nuclear power station emptied this island. Not a war, not a landlord, not a flood. Downray. The government's Cold War decision to build a nuclear facility on the Caithness mainland in the 1950s offered steady employment, wages, hours, reliability, the mainland, and one by one the families of Stroma crossed the Pentland Firth and did not come back. By 1957, only 16 people remained on an island that had held a peak population of approximately 550. The last families left in 1962. The lighthouse was automated in 1997. Stroma has been empty for 63 years. The island sits 3 miles from Caithness in the Pentland Firth, accessible only by charter boat from Gills Bay or John O'Groats, with no scheduled service, no ferry, no formal access provision. The Pentland Firth tidal races reach 12 knots. They are among the most powerful in Europe. The crossing is genuinely dangerous and should only be attempted by experienced skippers who know the tidal windows. The island rewards the crossing. Stone farmhouses in 2 settlements, Nethertown and Uppertown, stand roofless. A school building remains. A derelict church. The agricultural field system is visible across the heathland. A harbour was completed in 1956, 6 years before the last residents left. It was the island's best piece of infrastructure, the most significant public investment in Stroma's history, and it arrived just as the island was being vacated. The harbour is still there, but there are no boats in it. The writer Cal Flynn visited Stroma for her 2020 book Islands of Abandonment and described the combination of standing farmhouse walls and the visible, audible Pentland Firth tidal races as creating a quality of recentness that older ruins do not produce. People left this island within living memory, Flynn observed. The buildings are substantial enough that the absence of people feels wrong rather than expected. The nuclear plant that drew them away is visible as a smudge on the Caithness coast. You are standing on the island. The Pentland Firth churns in all directions. The watercolor changes visibly at the tidal races, white-capped and churning at maximum flow. Inside the farmhouse, wind moves through the open roof space. The track runs the length of the island through grass and heather. At the harbour, the water is empty. The pier the island built for itself when it was already ending stands in perfect order, waiting for boats that have not arrived in 6 decades. The honest note is this: Stroma is private land. Scottish Outdoor Access Code rights permit. Walking in principle. The Pentland Firth makes reaching the island the most technically demanding crossing on this list. There is no formal path in, no formal permission, and no infrastructure since 1962. The buildings are real. The harbour is real. The sea between you and it is not forgiving. If the last people who lived here left to work at a nuclear power station 63 years ago, and the harbour they built before leaving is still standing empty, is this an island waiting to be rediscovered, or one that has already given its answer? 9. Swona, Pentland Firth, Orkney. In March 1974, James and Violet Rosie left the Orcadian island of Swona with only what they could carry. James's Parkinson's disease had made island life impossible. They did not pack the furniture, they did not take the Christmas cards, the newspaper, or the household objects arranged on the shelves. They left the table set. They left the cattle in the fields, 8 cows and 1 bull. They never returned. Swona is 92 hectares and lies 3 miles from South Ronaldsay in the Pentland Firth. It is privately owned by the Annell family. There is no regular boat service. The island has SSSI and Special Protection Area designations. The cattle left behind in 1974 have been breeding without human intervention for 50 years. The herd is now approximately 17 to 20 animals. Researchers from the Scottish Agricultural College have studied them as a natural experiment in feral cattle behaviour. They have been classified as a distinct genetic population. Nobody planned this, nobody stops it. The cattle that have been wild for 50 years do not behave like farm cattle. The writer Cal Flynn visited Swona for Islands of Abandonment and described the encounter with the herd as unexpectedly intimidating. Animals that have lived without human contact for 50 years have developed a relationship to human presence that is categorically different from anything on a farm. She described the interior of the farmhouse as deeply affecting in a specific way. Personal objects left in place since March 1974 produce a quality of absence that impersonal ruins cannot. A newspaper still sits in the house from the month the last family left. The clear reality is that Swona is not somewhere you can live. It is somewhere you can visit, if you can charter a boat through the Pentland Firth and convince the skipper the tidal window is right. The farmhouse is not habitable, the structures are deteriorating, The contents belong to the Annal family, and the SSSI and Special Protection Area designations restrict any habitation or building. The island is the most evocative on this list and the least practically available. You are on Swona, the grey Orcadian sky. The farmhouses stand in the center of the island. Through a window, furniture. Objects on a shelf, arranged for people who left 50 years ago and have never come back. In the field beyond, the cattle watch without approaching. Not wild in the way deer are wild. Not domesticated in the way farm animals are domesticated. Something has happened to them in 50 years without human contact that has no name in ordinary animal behavior. They have become something we have not seen before. If the cattle left behind when the last family departed in 1974 have been developing their own social structures on an uninhabited Orcadian island for 50 years, what does that say about what was really keeping them domesticated in the first place? 8. Gruinard Island, Wester Ross, Scotland. Gruinard Island is 1 kilometre from the B9057 road in Wester Ross. It is 485 acres of Northwest Highland landscape, heather, moorland, coastal cliffs. From the mainland road, it is visually indistinguishable from any other Highland island. There is a small lay-by where people stop to photograph it. In 1942, the War Office requisitioned Gruinard under Operation Vegetarian. Scientists from Porton Down detonated bombs containing anthrax spores over penned sheep on the island. The goal was to test whether a biological weapon could be spread over Germany's farming regions. 5 million anthrax-infected linseed cakes intended to kill cattle and create famine. The tests proved the weapon viable. The island was contaminated and closed. It remained off-limits for 48 years. In 1986, decontamination began. 280 tons of formaldehyde mixed with seawater was sprayed across the island, and the top layer of infected soil was removed and incinerated. On 24 April 1990, the island was officially declared safe. A government scientist walked onto it carrying a bunch of flowers, a carefully staged photograph meant to convey what words had failed to convey for 48 years. On 1st May 1990, the island was sold back to the heirs of its original owners for exactly £500. 48 years of anthrax contamination was valued at nothing. If you have been watching this list and want to see what is still to come, subscribe. The next 9 entries include an island where 1 in 8 of all the puffins in Britain can be reached for free, a 13th century castle you can sleep in that was paid for with rabbit money, and the island that proved an entire community can run entirely on renewable energy before most governments had figured out how to write the policy. The Ministry of Defence's decontamination agreement came with a clause, further work if necessary, within 150 years of sale. That liability window runs until the year 2140. The plainest, most honest note on this list is this. This is the only island where the catch might literally kill you. The official position is that the island is safe. The island is currently grazed by sheep from the Gruinard estate, the most practical evidence that it is considered safe. A wildfire burned approximately 200 hectares in March 2022. The estate said the fire had done good for the vegetation. A BBC Scotland documentary in 2022 raised questions about whether mainland contamination had been covered up during the 48 years the island was closed. These questions have not been fully answered. You are on the mainland road, looking at an ordinary Highland island 1 kilometer offshore. The peaks of Antilach rise behind it. Heather, cliffs, grass, no visible sign of anything unusual. If a government scientist walking onto a biological warfare test site carrying flowers is what passes for a safety guarantee, and the government's own paperwork hedges that guarantee for 150 years, how safe is safe enough? 7. Handa Island, Sutherland, Scotland. Handa Island is 1.5 kilometers off the coast of Sutherland, accessible by a small ferry from the village of Tarbet. The ferry runs on demand, Monday to Saturday, from April to September. In 1847, the island community of 65 people, who had their own daily parliament, with the oldest widow as queen, emigrated to Nova Scotia following the Highland potato famine. Today, the Scottish Wildlife Trust manages the island and advertises a paid seasonal ranger position each year. The vacancy in 2026 carried a salary of £26,112, full-time equivalent, for a 6-month term from March to September. Interviews were held in January 2026. The ranger manages over 8,000 visitors per season across 100-meter cliffs that hold the largest breeding colonies of razorbills and guillemots in the United Kingdom, 11% and 9% of the total British population respectively. Visitors describe the cliff experience as once seen, never forgotten. One account said, "The sight, the sound, the smell were almost unbelievable." The Great Stack of Handa rises from the sea on the northwest coast, a column of red sandstone the height of a 35-story building, covered entirely in nesting birds. It was first climbed in 1876 by Donald MacDonald, a native of St Kilda. The connection between the two island communities and their extraordinary seabird landscapes is specific and documented. 6. Taransay, Outer Hebrides, Scotland. Taransay is 3 kilometers off the west coast of Harris, in the Outer Hebrides. It is approximately 3,800 acres, the largest uninhabited island in Scotland. The last permanent residents left in 1974. In January 2000, the BBC filmed Castaway 2000 there. 36 volunteers attempting to live self-sufficiently for a year. The experiment is the closest documented real-time account of what island life on Taransay involves. The estate, Borv Lodge, owned by the Kelleher family since 2011, described the island's history as running from a 9,000-year-old midden on the Atlantic side through Viking settlement, a clan massacre in 1944, and Hebridean crofting, to a BBC reality television production about self-sufficiency, and then a private rewilding program. Day trips are bookable via islyoftaransay.com. Holiday accommodation exists at the former settlement of Piel. There is no residency scheme. The rewilding program, which has removed all sheep in favor of lighter cattle grazing and planted native trees, has brought back golden eagles, a pair, and 2 pairs of sea eagles to an island 10 minutes by boat from Harris. Britain's largest uninhabited island has golden eagles. Almost nobody goes. If Britain's largest uninhabited island is accessible in 10 minutes by boat on a fine day from Harris and has been empty since 1974, what does it mean that almost nobody goes and nobody lives there? The National Trust for Scotland received Canna, a 1,100-hectare inner Hebridean island 7 miles west of Mallaig, as a gift in 1981 from the scholar and farmer John Lorne Campbell. The gift included the island, Canna House, and the Gaelic Archive, one of the most important collections of Gaelic oral tradition in existence, documenting a language and oral culture that was actively dying out during Campbell's lifetime. Canna has a Calmac ferry service 3 times weekly in winter and 4 times in summer. It has approximately 15 permanent residents and a working farm with 600 North Country Cheviot ewes and approximately 50 suckler cows. The National Trust for Scotland has been explicitly recruiting new permanent residents for years. In 2022, a guesthouse manager role at Tigard received over 100 applications from around the world. A farming tenancy was advertised in October 2025 for a 2026 start. The honest note is that 15 people are below the threshold for sustainable community self-sufficiency, and the National Trust for Scotland acknowledges this directly. The ferry, the harbour, the Gaelic archive, and the rat-free status since 2008, when an eradication program eliminated the rats that had preyed on Manx shearwater nests for decades, make Canna the most formally accessible island residency on this list. 4. The Shiant Isles, Outer Hebrides, Scotland. The Shiant Isles, Garb Islean, Ilian and Taigi, and Ilian Moira sit 5 miles southeast of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides. Tom Nicholson owns them. His father Adam wrote about them in Sea Room in 2001, considered one of the finest books about British island life in the modern era. Tom offers the bothy on Ilian and Taig for free. Email Tom at shiantisleys.net for the key and to be added to the calendar. No fee. Sign a liability waiver. Bring all food and all water. There is no reliable fresh water on the islands. The charter boat from Stornoway costs approximately £700 for a return trip. The islands hold approximately 240,000 puffins, 1 in 8 of the entire British puffin population. The dolerite columns on the cliffs are geologically spectacular hexagonal basalt similar to the Giant's Causeway, but on a grander scale. People have died on the Shiant Isles. Falls from the dolerite. Minch crossings in deteriorating weather. The liability waiver is not a formality. The Minch has no all-weather anchorage. The boat that delivers you may not be able to return on the planned day. This is what free looks like when it is completely honest. You are inside the Shiant bothy. Wind against the stone walls. Below the cliff, the Minch against the dolerite. Outside, if you open the door, 240,000 puffins, 1 in 8 of all the puffins in Britain, nesting on these 3 islands, free to visit, free to stay, genuinely dangerous. If 1 in 8 of all the puffins in Britain lives on islands where you can stay for free, but you have to sign a liability waiver because the danger is genuine, is that the most honest offer on this list? 3. Lundy, Bristol Channel, Devon. Martin Harmon purchased Lundy in 1925 and declared it an independent principality. He issued his own stamps, denominated in puffins, and charged a toll to land. He was prosecuted and fined by the Crown. The stamps are now collector's items. The Landmark Trust has managed Lundy since 1969, a granite plateau 3 miles long and half a mile wide in the Bristol Channel, 12 miles from Hartland Point in Devon. Henry III built the castle in 1250, funded by the sale of rabbits from the island. The castle still stands and you can stay in it. 23 self-catering properties, a campsite, a working farm with Soay sheep and Exmoor ponies, and the Morisco Tavern, a pub, make Lundy the most infrastructure-rich island on this list. The electricity is switched off from midnight to 6 a.m. No televisions, radios, or telephones are permitted in the accommodation. Approximately 28 permanent residents live on the island as Landmark Trust staff. The honest consideration is this: Lundy is the most comfortable island on this list and the least free. The accommodation is paid. The permanent community is not open to the public. It belongs to the Trust's staff. The island exists as a managed experience of what island life might feel like, rather than island life itself. The Landmark Trust puts it this way: living here, however briefly, offers our visitors a unique experience. One that can never be exactly repeated, no matter how often they return, and return they often do. 2. Scarba, Argyll, Scotland. 1 mile north of Jura, separated from it by the Gulf of Corryvreckan, Scarba rises to 449 meters. Cruach Scarba is the highest summit of any uninhabited Scottish island. The Gulf of Corryvreckan is the third largest whirlpool in the world. The Royal Navy classifies the Gulf as unnavigable. In 1947, George Orwell was living on Jura, writing 1984. He took his family and guests through the Corryvreckan in a small motorboat. The whirlpool capsized the boat. The party clung to rocks, and they were eventually rescued by a lobster boat. Orwell's son, Richard, was thrown from the boat. The crew of the lobster boat were described as astonished that anyone had survived. From Scarba's southern shore, at maximum flow, the whirlpool is visible. It makes a sound described as a roar or a grinding, audible from a significant distance. Scarba is privately owned, occasionally for sale, and accessible by charter or by kayak if you time the crossing for slack water. The ruins of a cleared settlement sit on the hillside. Red deer move through the bracken. No other people. If the waters between you and Jura are classified as unnavigable by the Royal Navy, and if a man writing one of the most important novels of the 20th century nearly drowned attempting them, how much of freedom is about where you are, and how much is about what it took to get there? 1. The Isle of Eigg, Inner Hebrides, Scotland. On the 12th of June, 1997, the community of Eigg, then 64 people, completed the purchase of their own island for £1.5 million. They did it in partnership with the Scottish Wildlife Trust and Highland Council, ending a succession of absentee and eccentric private ownerships that had brought the population to its lowest point in living memory. The buyout directly influenced the Land Reform Scotland Act 2003. It became the model for community buyouts across the Highlands and Islands. In 2008, Eigg became the first island in the world to operate a 100% renewable energy grid, combining wind, solar, and hydro. Every house has electricity 24 hours a day. The population has grown from 64 at the time of the buyout to approximately 110 now. A tea room, a post office, a school, a shop, and a community hall are functioning. And Sgurr, the pitchstone ridge at 393 meters, is visible from the mainland and from the ferry as you approach. The singing sands on the south coast produce a high-pitched hum under dry conditions, the quartz grains rubbing together underfoot. In a cave on the hillside called Uamfraing, the bones of approximately 395 people lie where they fell. In 1577, MacLeods from Skye lit a fire at the cave entrance and killed everyone on the island who had hidden there. The bones were discovered in 1837, which confirmed the massacre. The bones are still there. The Isle of Eigg Heritage Trust is the best evidence available that island living can work in 21st century Britain, not as an escape, not as a fantasy, but as a functioning community with governance structures that allocate land by need rather than price. The Trust's approval is required for new residents. Remote or self-employment is a practical necessity. The community is selective. This is not a wild frontier. It is something more demanding than that, a community that has built something worth protecting and is careful about who it allows in. 15 islands. One runs entirely on renewable energy that it built itself. One is contaminated with anthrax, and its safety guarantee runs to 2,140. One has a free bothy where you sign a liability waiver because the danger is genuine. One has a pub landlord who is officially a king. One has feral cattle, developing their own social structures in the Pentland Firth. One is where wireless communication began. On that island, water is rationed. Cardiff can be visible, yet unreachable when the weather turns. What connects them is not simply that they are empty. They are empty for reasons, specific decisions, specific failures, specific forces. Understanding those reasons matters more than the fantasy of arrival. The housing crisis is real. The desire to disappear is rational.